All right, so I guess should we start our first little talk here?
Yeah, because like I said, I don't know how long these are gonna go, and the Fortran thing might be one of those ones that takes us like an hour and a half or something. So we might want to do it as a separate thing. I don't know. So I wanted to. You sounded like you were having like an existential crisis or something. The way you described it in the Twitter message.
I
You
am.
know what I
I'm.
mean?
I am crisising right now, which is that okay? So I'm gonna give you some facts here,
Yeah,
Casey.
because I felt like this was important. Like this was like an emotional like this was we need to do emotional processing. Like we need to it's still guy stuff. I mean, I'm not saying but
Yeah, I know.
but it's some emotional processing here.
I'm not afraid of a little emotional processing. All
Uh,
right.
you know,
Yeah, we
I'm
got this.
comfortable with my masculinity, and we need to process some emotions right now.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you my problem here.
Okay.
It's that often when I'm building things, I
Hmm.
build things such that I have to do several round trips to various internet services. So,
Okay.
like having to aggregate a bunch of Twitch chat together, say record my audio, put those together, decode audio via Whisper, take Twitch chat and get, Chat Jippity to start kind of organizing it. Like this is one thing I'm building right now. And then combining those two results to turn like to distill it into a final voice reading that's going to be Chat Jippity reacting based on what I said and how Twitch chat felt about it. And so it's like whenever
Gotcha.
and a lot of projects are going to kind of fall under this type of scope, which is just like a lot of just asynchronous requesting type stuff. And so I want to pick a new language of the year, 2025.
Okay.
I did Rust for 2 years. I did Go for 1 year. I made a video about how I think I will never program Rust again. People hated that.
Okay.
But, really, my whole reason is just like, I just don't like programming in Rust. Like, that's it. All technicalities
Yeah.
aside, when I see really nice Rust, I go, wow, that's really nice. That's like really cool. Like, I love what you can do in it. I don't want to do it. And so I'm
Okay.
trying to think
Okay.
about this thing, and it feels like I'm in an emotional crisis mode because it's like, do I continue with Go, which is just not that great of a language? Like, by all objective measures, Go is not fantastic. It has just lots of like foot guns, but it's extremely productive language, and you can effectively build anything you want in it very easily. Especially if you have to go if you need to go listen to two things at once for a short period of time and then come back. Green threads are fantastic, right? Because you're just like, go do your thing, and then when I say you're done, and we come back and we're all fantastic. It just feels really easy, and so I love the experience of a runtime because they just make that type of behavior super simple. And so it's like, do I continue with Go? Or do I explore a language that isn't Go? And I kind of feel like I need to master one metaprogramming language experience. Like I need to actually become good at macros of some sort. And so I've kind of been narrowing down Zig as the option because its macro system is comp time, which means it's just Zig that's executed at compile time to produce Zig. So it's not like it's not like what's called C-based preprocessor macro. So it's not like a separate language you're learning, or it's not like Rust's two different macro systems of both declarative and procedural, right? It's just one. It's just Zig. So it's just Zig that makes Zig if you want to go down the comp time. So you actually program something that looks like reflection, and then it compiles that from reflection, just generates the 3, 10, 18 functions that you actually used by calling a bunch of times. So it's a very interesting and compelling thing. Also, Odin. I think Ginger Bill's here. I think I saw Ginger Bill in the chat several times. Ginger Bill, awesome guy. And so Odin also, I believe, has metaprogramming as well. Sounds very exciting. Elixir has metaprogramming as well. All sound really, really good. And so I'm kind of just stuck in this idea of what do I choose to specialty in? Because I was going to specialty in Rust, but I just found myself getting progressively more frustrated with it. And I just feel like I'm in a free fall emotionally. Because Go is not a deep language. Go is a language you can learn in a couple weeks and be productive really, really fast. I just kind of miss the days of something that has a little bit more depth to it.
So I guess what I would say is my meta feedback on that is it's unfortunate that you have to be choosing this now. And the reason that I say that is because I feel like now is not a fantastic time to have to be choosing a language because, from my perspective, I feel like actually getting proficient in a language takes quite some time. Learning a language is not so hard. You can do that in an afternoon, depending on the language. But actually learning how to program that language well takes quite a bit of time. And that's especially true, I think, the better programmer you are, the more true that is, because most resources made in most programming languages by most people will be mid. That's just
Yeah,
how it is.
that's technical
So what you
definition.
will see, what you will see when you go look up how to do something in Rust or whatever is going to be the mid version of that thing. And so usually if you're a good programmer, you're even at a bigger disadvantage, because it means, oh, if I learn to program Rust and I want to do Rust or whatever, I'm also now going to have to spend the time of being sort of an innovator to figure out what are the great ways to do these kinds of things in Rust, because probably people haven't actually figured that out yet, right? And so there's a lot of that kind of thing, which is really a problem for, looking at a language like, this is going to be a big investment, right? And right now there are so
Can I
many of
rephrase
these
what you
new
said really quickly?
Sorry, what? Yes,
Can I-
please.
Can I rephrase it really quickly? What you're saying, just so I understand this correctly, is that obviously syntactical learning is very, very simple. When you use Go for the first time, say you're coming from JavaScript, it's very, very simple. Or you're going from Rust, from Zig to Go, or any of these language transitions. You try to use that language the way you're used to using a language, and then you find out that you just run into a lot of problems. So what you're trying to say is that experience. Obviously, the harder a language or the more deep a language is, the more experience it takes to really be fully good at that language.
And also, the better you wish to be, I guess, is the other part
there's
of
more
that, right?
opportunity for being good at the language. Like I can't really get much better at Go because there's not anything I can really be good at. It's just procedural. It's like, dude, I could if and for and go like that.
True,
Boom.
right? But even if you take a thing like, if you take assembly language, right, which is the most procedural thing, there's nothing in it, right? You can use a macro assembler, hopefully you will, right? But it's not that powerful. Otherwise, it's like you could spend a decade becoming a good assembly language programmer, learning all of the ways to do things, right? And so some of that translates language to language, some of it doesn't. And to your point, the more complicated the language is in terms of features that it offers you, the more space there is to explore there, the more possibility that something you haven't tried playing around with yet, if you got good at it, would be a better way to do whatever you're doing than what you were currently doing. So it just compounds. And so part of the thing that I think is really bad about choosing a language currently is that there's so much new language development going on right now, which is good for the future. Like, that's not a bad thing. But it means that it's not a great time to make that choice. You don't really know where all these languages are going. You don't really know how good the tooling will be for each of them in the future. You don't know how widely they'll be adopted or if they'll be abandoned or whatever else, right? And you end up in this situation where you are sort of taking on an additional burden that you won't be 10 years from now, right? You are one of the people doing the work of determining which of these languages is good and which of these languages will survive. That's extra work, which maybe is fine and maybe you want to do it. But I just wanted to say before we start talking about this, like a meta point, which is just one of the reasons I haven't really been doing anything in these languages or experimenting with them, is because I'm just like, I don't feel like I really want to spend that time now. I would rather let this shake out more and look at it 5 years from now and then be like, okay, which language am I going to switch to? Because I only want to switch once away from, C, assuming these languages are better enough. I don't want to be switching as you say, you're tired of it probably, right?
Yeah. Because I did, a decade plus of having to build a lot of web apps, and so a lot of JavaScript, Java, C++, that kind of stuff. And so it's like I just wanted to freshen up. That's why the whole Go, Rust, Zig thing is just like looking to the future, what is going to be a very amazing experience. And obviously Go, very great one to have in your tool bag, but I don't think you need an aggressively large amount of experience to be pretty dang good at it. So I'm like, okay, so this one is one that I can just always have available. I need to build an asynchronous service. Bing, boom, 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 boom. I got it down. Like, I'll just throw Go in there. And so I'm looking for that, like a nice kind of like the fast, the high end language, if you will, the Porsche of languages. And I don't want to do C++ again.
Yeah, well, that C++ is a terrible language, obviously,
Terrible language.
and I would never recommend anyone use it for anything, right? Like C, I think, is kind of remarkable in that you can still be very productive in C to this day. C++, I will never understand the people who defend it. I really don't. I'm sorry, everyone out there. I know there's people who will be so sad and mad at me for saying this, but I literally will never understand why anyone likes that language. It is so bad. It just has it has so many features and all of them are bad. Like they all don't quite do what you actually need them to do. And it's almost like a head scratcher. Like, how did you manage to add this many things to the language? And 99% of them are critically broken. It's almost like a winning streak. Well, I guess it's a losing streak, an unbroken and Guinness record long language losing streak that they've been having for 30 years, and they just show no signs of breaking. And I'm just like, that's remarkable. So yeah, no, I am 100% in support of just like, I think people C and assembly language are two things I think everyone should learn. Assembly language, not to write, but just to read. And C to write, because I think it's sort of a mother language at this point. It's just good, and it's not hard, right? There's not a lot to see. You can learn it quickly. I think those are good languages to know, but C++ is just, it's useless. So
I also have a rule that if you can't read the standard library, I'm highly suspicious of the language. Like,
yes,
that's just one of my things, is that if I go to definition and I can't just go, oh yeah, there's some things I will never understand about like extra, whatever they put those things up, directives on the top of stuff that are just like, they're highly optimized. I get it. I won't understand all the things, but this is insane. Like when you look at the standard definition of anything inside C++, it's like, I cannot read this code. I don't know what's happening or why it's happening, but it's actually just, it's bonkers.
So, I guess what I would say is, from your perspective, then you're saying, I just want to make sure I got this right. So from your perspective, you are like, I need to choose a language for next year. So I don't have the luxury of waiting around or just being a dilettante in a few languages for a year. It's like, I want to actually pick a language for next year. This is a requirement, and I'm going to program fairly seriously in that language, and that's just what's happening. So the hand is forced.
Let me say it this way, is that due to my quote-unquote content creation status, I want to investigate a language in a more thorough manner, and then kind of explain how it makes me feel at the end of the whole thing. Like I said, I did multiple years in Rust and then quit it for a while and then went back and went, yeah, I still feel like, I don't think this is just like, I'm sure there's a great use case for Rust that does exist that's just absolutely phenomenal. And I'm sure a lot of things with operating systems and security and all that probably warrant having such a harder language maybe. You could probably convince me or sell me on those kind of things. I'm just saying, hey, you can sell me on memory safety on these kind of things. But it's just like, it's just something I find zero joy in. And I think that's a very important part of programming, is also just liking the thing itself. And so it's like, okay, there's something there. I just like Go. I think it's I think it's the worst language ever. But I'm like, I actually kind of like, I like it. It's like my boy Go. Yeah, he's like, a little deficient, but he's good. Even JavaScript. I hate the language, but I'm like, you can get a lot of stuff done in JavaScript.
Well, that was part of the thing I was going to ask too about that, is that like one of the problems with a lot of these new languages is their use cases are not your use case either, right? Like most of what the people who are working on these languages are thinking about is not, how do I aggregate a bunch of web services together to do stuff, which is what you're saying is going to be a core requirement. And so, I mean, I'm sure they all have, curl equivalent crap in them, right? And presumably a JSON parser or something. But I guess, I mean, will they be as good as Go for that kind of thing? And the answer is like, that part I don't really know, because maybe they are, but maybe they're not, because Go, that's all they were doing with that. What I mean? Like that seems like all it's for, right? Yeah. So I do think that part is a risk, and maybe one thing you could do is check out that part. Maybe do a little round robin of like, how good is the web services part of these languages? Like how much, it's not really a language thing so much, but like the standard library or what libraries are available, do those look robust enough? Or am I going to spend, is your whole next year going to be like, I had to rewrite the HTTPS layer for, whatever the language is I picked? That's not going to be a fun time. I mean, maybe it is, but that's a thing. The other thing I was going to mention is, if metaprogramming is something that interests you, unfortunately, that does mean probably get on the JAI beta. I mean, they've had the most impressive metaprogramming stuff I've seen consistently by far. And so it feels like if metaprogramming is your thing, you're going to want JAI. That's kind of just how it is. So I don't know. That might be what you would want. I don't know.
I did make some tweets about kind of just like this language conundrum I'm in, and Jay Blow did send me an email saying if I want in, I can get in. He just wants to make sure it's somebody that's going to use the language that gets in. And so it's like I want to use it, but I know it's also very game oriented, and so I also want to make sure it's a language that I mean I do actually want to write some games this year. Like that would be the whole point, is to try to figure out something really wild to write in it. And so maybe that is a good one. So they have a really good metaprogramming side to it.
I mean, at the risk of pissing off some people who will probably complain about, like, no, Nim had it, or so, like there's people who will get mad at me saying this, but basically, as far as I'm concerned, JAI basically, like, John invented modern metaprogramming. Like, the system he designed is what most languages now have a not as good copy of. So basically, like, you know, and that includes C++'s, like, they have, like, Circle and those sorts of things that they were doing. But, like, John was kind of a trailblazer there, going, like, how do we actually make it so that this works robustly, so that you can actually have, you know, recursive metaprogramming happening, so your metaprograms can, you know, continue to generate things which then feed back into the language properly and all that sort of stuff. And it was really impressive what he did. And so he was kind of first out of that. And I have not seen anyone take it as seriously as he's taken it still, which is not to be a knock on the other languages that have it, because I think it's good for languages to have these things. But if you're talking about metaprogramming, I still have not seen anyone take it as seriously as JAI has. It's a very powerful metaprogramming system. And, you know, that's probably where you would want to start if that's what you were looking at. Right?
Yeah, because that's kind of one of my things is I want a language that could be very useful in the next 10 years, and I also want metaprogramming.
I would try it. I would try it. And I think another reason that might be good is because it might be nice for them to get feedback on web use cases more. Because, you know, that it is true that, like I said, I think a lot of these languages are not super webby. Yeah. And so I know there are web people who are using JAI in that beta, but yeah, I don't know. And I guess the same would go for, you had mentioned Odin, and Ginger Bill is here. I don't know how much testing they get of that sort of thing. I mean, you can look. Odin has some pretty cool stuff written in it, like that EmberGen thing that was sort of its original project. It looks awesome, right?
Yeah.
It's very professional. And, you know, so I feel like there's very clear demonstrations that these languages can be made. Good things can be made in some of these languages, and I've seen examples of that, right? I don't actually know very much, though, about that web part. Like, I don't know how many people are doing things like, hey, I need to integrate Twitch chat and ping and this and that, and I'm going to pull them all together to do this thing. I don't know how much any of these languages have really had that be pushed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so I think that's probably fair in any of these. And I also know that I'm slightly barking up the wrong tree. It's just that I like this tree particular, because I did, you know, one of my early times in programming, my first couple years were spent programming C. And I just really enjoyed that time. I always enjoyed the experience of programming C, even though it was obviously very easy to feel confident and then to unfeel confident and realize you know nothing often. As simple as the language was, it was also extremely difficult. And so it was I always enjoyed that. And I always kind of looked back on that as like a really great time. And so I've been wanting to kind of find the next one where I can really do that. And I was really hoping Rust, honestly, I just really hoped that Rust was going to be that. And then I just realized I just did not. It was not that. And so I talked to Ginger too, and he of course, as people tell me, he's the first person to tell you shouldn't use his language because it doesn't quite meet his like high expectation of exactly what should be done for you. And so he's always like, well, the HTTP stuff is not quite 100% ready. You still have to use third-party modules, so I don't think you should use it because we haven't adopted the official, you know, on-brand HTTP stuff. And so it's just like, well, yeah, okay, maybe I hear you, but you know, that's also good that there's third-party stuff. Like, third-party is not a bad, you know, is a good sign as well.
Well, I actually really appreciate that approach. Bill's approach is very refreshing, right? And it makes it easy to support his language too, because you don't constantly have 800,000 Odin people in your feed complaining that you didn't use Odin, because they just took a nice approach, which is like, we're not going to oversell this. Like, we're going to
Yeah.
keep working on it. And right. I hate the overselling. Overselling, the reason I hate it so much is because it's where C++ came from. C++ was basically a language where, you had a guy, Bjarne Stroustrup, who was very motivated to have his language be adopted, to the point where there are actually anecdotes of like some of the people originally involved in working on C back at Bell Labs were like, we don't think this is very good. There's a bunch of things about this that wouldn't. And he was like angry with them, and it's like, this will hurt the adoption of C++ if you say these things. Like, don't say these things, right? Having adoption as a goal and pushing adoption, while that may be necessary at some point when your language is really good, doing it early is how we got C++, and that's just bad. Like, stop
Yeah.
overselling. And so when if I hear a language designer out there or members of a language community pushing something, and I've looked at that language and I know it's not very good yet, right? I get pretty grumpy about that. And I kind of understand why they're doing it, because I know that, sometimes you need momentum for this project. If you're relying on like open source contributions or something, you need to get people involved in it or it won't go. But at the same time, it's like, that is a very bad thing, because when you prioritize adoption like that, what you'll probably end up with is a bad language that is widely used. That's what we got with C++, and that was really bad. And so I like the approach that Bill took with Odin, of not pushing it aggressively, not overselling it, not going out there and just saying whatever it takes to try and get people to use it, and also not being delusional about the language. I've seen a lot of that where people make claims about a language that aren't true because they're overzealous about it, and that's bad too. JAI, same thing. John was like, this is staying closed source for a while. We're doing beta for a while until I am sure that this is good and solid, because it's going to start, like, once it starts getting adopted, you get lock-in, you have to start prioritizing other things, and like, I don't want that. I love those approaches. I think they're going to result in better languages in the long run, so I have positive things to say about them. But yeah, so that said, I just don't know how good they are at things like web yet. And so that would be an interesting thing for you to assess, because you are exactly the programmer who could probably assess something like that. That's like your bread and butter, and you would know, like, this isn't done very well here. Maybe can we do something better? That would be a very interesting thing. I would like to see that personally.
Yeah. Well, I just feel like it's just fun to, like, I get the opportunity to explore these things, so I might as well explore a language that has, high potential and still is in its more early times. That's why, Zig, again, is very appealing. Is because, it's been adopted by Bun now. So Bun obviously runs a lot of JavaScript, Ghosty, Tiger Beetle. There's some other bigger ones that I'm forgetting right now, but those are like pretty dang big projects, and they all speak extremely highly of Zig. And so it's like, okay, I could see this being a very exciting thing to work in then.
Yeah, I mean, having looked at Zig a couple times because people pointed to it, I'm not sure what, like, I don't really see a lot of the bonus there, but maybe that's just because I'm coming from having looked at a bunch of these languages and gone, like, what's the current status? I feel like it's good if you're coming from, if what you were looking for was C again, then it seems like I can understand maybe the choice, right? It's like, well, I don't really want to go C++, so I'm looking for something that's just a C extension, right, or something like that. I don't know. But a lot of the stuff is just like, it's way too much typing for what it does. And so I was like, I don't really get it. I don't, and a lot of the choices, like the error handling choices stuff, I don't know. All I can say is I was like, I don't really get it. I don't get this one. Which is not to say that maybe it works for other people. Like, maybe they're like, thumbs up on that. But again, I would say, like, I can't imagine picking that over JAI, for example. If you have access to the beta, that would make no sense to me, right?
Okay.
But unless you just want something that's open source.
I do like the open source nature, because I just find generally, because if there's not a lot of docs, you can eventually find something that has what you're looking for, so that's one more nice part about anything that's open source.
Yeah, and like I said, that is one downside of picking a language now, right? Is that you end up in this situation where some languages that might be right around the corner open source, right? Or that might soon have some of the things you're looking for. You don't know which ones they're going to be,
Yeah.
right? And so that part, yeah, I just don't know. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I would say, it's a really hard time. And since I am not willing to make a switch yet, I have not done the really deep kind of eval on these languages. I mean, my assumption is I would have a lot of complaints right away in most of these languages, because they just don't have the kinds of things that I would be looking for, right?
What do you look for?
So, what?
What do you look for in a language? If you were to choose a
vector. Like, the language would be based entirely around vector compute and nothing else.
So Mojo?
Right? No, that's not based on vector. That's based on writing non-vector code that vectorizes, right?
Okay.
So I would want a language that was just like, I would almost want CUDA, right? I want the normal, the non-GPU version of CUDA, right? That's what I want. I don't really want sort of single lane programming. Is just not, I don't see that as being very useful anymore, right?
Okay.
And
I
by the way,
that's something Zig does pretty well. They have a vector built in. That they have this whole idea that you can just kind of walk through everything, built in the type, the width, how many you want in there, all that kind of stuff.
Well, most languages have that kind of vector. That's not what I mean by vector.
Okay.
Right? Vector programming is when you have a very good language for describing things scalar that are automatically vector.
Okay.
Right? And this is a difficult thing to do properly, right? I think Odin does have something like this. I feel like that had been added to Odin. I can't remember. But it's one of those things where most languages are not designed around it. Right? Does that make sense? It's an afterthought. It's like a vector type that you then use to do something, and it doesn't really capture what vector programming looks like, right?
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, these are all good things for me to think on. I'll go back and I'll sit down and I'll just do this. I did peruse a little bit of the Odin docs, and I really do like the for loops. I got to the for loops just kind of like looking at the basic language of it, and I was like, oh, okay, this is very nice. They did a very good job on that. I enjoy this, and the syntax just looks very pleasant or easy to use. Right? I'm just going to be real here. The only reason why I'm not considering a functional programming language, because if I were to choose one, it'd probably be OCaml. Because OCaml has the type system of Rust with just none of the other things of Rust. And so it's just like, oh, I like this. I like that Hindley-Milner type system, whatever it is. The ability to do like tagged unions and all that and being able to infer really greatly. Like, there's a lot of really cool things about the language. It's just I find functional syntax to be, maybe I just need more time in it. Maybe that's my big problem, is I just don't do it enough to really love it.
Is OCaml support non-garbage collected usage yet?
No, it's still garbage collected, but they have really clever things coming out in the new ones where you can like say certain properties about your function, and it will treat your function in a way that starts allocating on the stack as opposed to everything, like your traditional garbage collected language. So I think I don't know how it exactly works, but it seems really clever what you can do.
Well, I mean, yeah, maybe they've got that under control. I don't know. Functional programming to me, I don't love because, computers aren't that way. And so I kind of like, I don't necessarily like coming at it from that way originally, but I do like, I mean, I can see the appeal of writing certain types of code that way, right? So I'm not against it or anything, but it is a bit weird as your fundamental paradigm because it's kind of a mismatch at some level. But I haven't ever tried doing much programming in OCaml, although I did look at it quite some time ago. And the fact that it was heavily reliant on garbage collection was never great. But, that probably has improved quite a bit in the 15 years since I looked at OCaml, right? But yeah.
Apparently modern OCaml is very, very good. I've dabbled in it a few times now, and every time I do it, I go, I could like this language. I could like... And I think my biggest problem with functional languages is that right after you do that, I think you have to start writing white papers and never actually accomplish anything again. And so I've always been very worried about that dive into functional programming. And then I have to start wearing tie-dye T-shirts, and you have to start talking about memory and peer functions and all that constantly.
Yeah, I mean, it might be that what will happen is if you decide to do this next year in OCaml, you go back to school and become like Professor Primogen,
Yeah.
and all you do for the rest of your life is like talk about exactly how to represent things in the lambda calculus or whatever, right? And that's it.
Yeah.
We never hear from you again.
I just got sucked into the monoid land, and there it goes. I'm gone forever. Okay, so I don't know if you ever answered. What is like the thing that you look for if you were to ever choose something different? Because you just do C. So is it all just vector, just optimizing for that, or is there anything else that could pull you away?
It'd be pretty tough because as it is right now, when I'm programming, I have sort of my own like little meta layer that runs first that kind of cleans up some of the C things that I don't love. And the next step that I would want to take there is just having my own like I said, language that was geared towards exactly the way I think about vector stuff, right? So I'd want it vector and multi-core. I would want it exactly the way that I do it, right? And that's a pretty big step for me to take. Like I would basically be inventing my own language at that point if I decided to go that route. So I haven't done that, and I don't know that I ever will do that. But that would be the thing that would convince me that it's time for me to switch to a new language. And it's possible, I don't know, but it's possible that JAI's metaprogramming is already such that I could just write that. I might just be able to write that in their metaprogramming language and call it a day, because their metaprogramming language is very good. So I'm, I don't know. Maybe that's a route I go in the future. I'm not sure. But in terms of what I look for, I would really want to see that, because that would be a motivator for me to switch. If I just had to switch, like it was like, okay, it's time, you have to pick from one of these languages, and it's like, do you use Odin, do you use JI or something, or Rust, heaven forbid. Like I do have a list of things I go look at where I'm like, okay, here is a common thing that I think if you were making a modern language today, if you've thought about it at all, you can do this very easily. And then I would go look and see, can I do that easily? And I don't ever say what these are because I don't want anyone to game the system.
Yeah.
But I do have some of those things. And like, I tried that with Rust and it didn't even get past the first one, right? Like they hadn't even got my most basic test. It couldn't even do it at all, right?
Does not.
And so I was
require
like,
you to
well,
have
that's... Sorry, what?
Is the first test just you can't enforce me to use Ray right off the rip with no choice?
What is Ray?
Resource acquisition is initialization.
Oh, RAII. Sorry,
Ray.
I didn't know that was pronounced that way. Okay,
Oh,
RAII.
yeah.
Yeah.
Ray.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know. Is it called Ray? I don't.
I don't know what it's. I just call it RAII because I didn't even think Ray is probably much shorter and better.
I'm not really into saying a bunch of letters. I would just rather say a word.
Fair enough. No. Yeah. RAII is. I mean, absolutely a no-go. Like if you tell me that that's on the menu, we're done. But yeah. So I felt like. I kind of knew right off the bat, I'm like, the people who are making Rust just don't think about programming like I do, which again is not trying to say that other people, like if they think like you do, then it's a good language for you, right? They definitely don't think about programming the way I do. So I was like, no. But if I had to switch, I would run a bunch of those tests and then pick the one that went the best. But in terms of enticing me to switch, like if I didn't have to switch, it's that. It's like if someone came out with a really amazing real vector programming language, I would seriously consider it.
Okay. Well, it's good to know. All right. I like this discussion. Thank you for talking me through some languages and just thoughts about it. Maybe I'll have to do some thinking, but I got a little bit of time because I want to finish up my dumb idea, and then I have to finish up an HTTP course, and then it's time to choose and read.
Yeah, I mean, can you do a little experimentation first? I guess maybe you already have.
I did 2 months of playing around with Zig last year. Just kind of built a quick game, built a tower defense in it, and never got to the metaprogramming side of it. And I was just like, there's some things I really like about this language. There's some really neat things.
Can you do the same with Odin perhaps first and like give that a month of testing or something? Like maybe try just a little bit and then you can make a decision. I mean, you could even do that with JAI if John was okay with it, I guess. If you want someone who's definitely going to use it, I guess that doesn't count. But, might be interesting to just do a little test in each and then just pick the one you enjoyed the most.
Yeah, that might be the way to go. I am curious, like if J, do you, by the way, do you call it JAI or is it Jai or is it J?
I have no idea.
Okay.
And one of the things that is true about John is that he, for some reason, I think I'll use the word almost religiously opposed to name fetishizing. And so he's like, the language is just the language I'm working on. Like to the extent that if he just if he could have called it nothing at all, he would have, and only give it a name when it's completely done. That is John, right? And so I don't even know if I've ever heard him say the name.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I honestly, maybe he has, but I don't know if he has. Now that I think about it, like, have I actually heard him say it himself? So I have no idea. Jai, 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 probably. I mean, so here's the thing. I will say, John and me are both fans of what's his name, Michael Jai Williams, the guy who did like Black Dynamite, and then
Black Dynamite was one of the best shows. If it's that's the one where the white man is trying to get to shrink the cock size.
Yeah.
Through
and
okay.
it has so many good scenes. It has so many good scenes in it. It's basically a blaxploitation parody, and he's the lead.
Good.
He's the lead.
Okay.
And so I would say like you couldn't go wrong by pronouncing it the same way he pronounces his middle name. So maybe just go with that because John John can't object to that. I would say.
Okay. I didn't realize that John also liked Black Dynamite. That was
yes.
Oh, hey, I feel a little bit more akin to the guy now. Now that I know that.
Yes, he loves it, and as do I. We watched it together. In fact, if I remember correctly, at least I think we did. It's been a long time. I had seen it once for some reason. I don't know. I found out about it at like maybe a film festival or something. I don't remember. And it's like, oh my God, a blaxploitation parody. That sounds great. And of course I watched it. I was like massively over delivered. So I was,
Yeah, which is great. We can't, but now we're over delivering. It's over delivering. And so now someone might watch it and become disappointed.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry guys. I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah. It's okay. It's mid.
I don't know. It's mid, maybe as taken as a whole movie, but certain scenes in that movie are still some of my most hilarious scenes. Like that I laugh so hard at. So I don't know. Like it's mid as a whole.
I was only underselling it.
In sections, it is truly excellent. That's what I'll say.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Well, that was fun. Thank you.